Hi, Marvelous Ape students. I am Dr. Griffith, AP Environmental Science, filming from home today with my cozy blanket. Hope you all doing well. We're going to talk about sustainable agriculture today. This is lecture 5.15, and it's module 33 in your book on page 42 in your notes. So let's get started. Sustainable agriculture. This is a really big, important lecture. Lots of good stuff in here. Okay, so goals of sustainable agriculture. So our goal is to feed the world's population without destroying the land, polluting the environment, or reducing biodiversity. Eating without destroying the world. So you need to fulfill the need for food and fiber. You need to enhance soil quality. You need to minimize the use of non-renewable resources and allow for economic viability. So this usually requires more labor than unsustainable types of agriculture. So those are the things that you are writing into your notes. Okay. As always, feel free to pause if you need more time. So here's some practices, so sustainable practices in soil conservation. Number one is contour plowing. So what you do is you plow around the contour of the land, and this stops when the water runs off. It captures it so that you can water your crops better. It has less erosion, and actually is better for water holding capacity. The next one is windbreaks. So windbreaks are hedgerows around the outside of fields, and then they protect from wind. So it's just a physical barrier. If you make these windbreaks, it'll slow down the erosion and protect the crops. The next one is perennial crops. So you don't have to reseed and replant every year. They don't require annual plowing or herbicide applications to establish them. So as often as possible, perennial crops are a good bet for sustainable agriculture. The next one is terracing. So you're cutting into the land to create terraces, series of wide, flat constructed on slopes. So excuse me. So this makes use of land that's not all completely flat. You can actually grow things on an incline because not all the land that you have available is flat. So it makes it so that there's more availability of land to grow food. The next one is no-till agriculture. So the benefits of no-till agriculture is there's less erosion, there's less oxidation, and production of carbon dioxide. A drawback is it increases herbicides because of competing weeds. So when you're doing no-till, you're going to be like, in this case, there's, I think that is sugarcane that's left over, and then there's soybeans growing in between. So it uses that mulching from the crop before, but then sometimes you have weeds that you don't want. So that's a drawback. Then strip cropping is when you plant two crops together that work synergistically. So you use corn with peas. Corn requires a lot of nitrogen, and peas fix nitrogen. And if you remember the nitrogen cycle, nitrogen fixing plants like legumes, like peas, have the rhizobium, which is the bacteria that fixes nitrogen in the roots of the legumes, right? So let me go through that again. Nitrogen in the air is fixed by bacteria called rhizobium in the roots of plants called legumes. And when you fix that nitrogen in the soil, then the other plant can use it. So it's very sustainable, an excellent way to build nutrition in the next plant. So sustainable practices will improve soil fertility. So a big, always, always, always big, and I just say always, big one, crop rotation. Crop rotation, memorize it. This is good for building soil, for decreasing pesticides, and it's really one of the big kingpins of all sustainable agriculture. This just takes more work. So let me talk to you about that just a little bit more. So it reduces specific demands of one crop on the soil, prepares the soil for the next crops, and promotes synergy. Peas, then corns, okay, then so that you can get that nitrogen going, okay. So you plant legumes, and you plant root vegetables, and you plant fruit, then you plant leaf vegetables, and then you go in a cycle, and it's the best way to be sustainable. It takes a lot more time and effort, though. Green manure is animal and plant waste as fertilizer instead of synthetics. So anytime you get closer to how nature really does this, when you're using the dead organic material that gets broken down by the decomposers and detritus feeders, that will build up the soil, not just give the nutrients, but make the soil fertile and rich and absorbent and full of nutrients. So you want to use green manure to compost. Next is limestone. So using calcium carbonate, which is also limestone, neutralizes acidic soil. So sometimes as you're growing crops over time, using the same plants over and over again in the soil, your soil gets acidic. So you can add lime or limestone or calcium carbonate, which allows the soil to uptake nutrients more efficiently. So you want to keep that acid base, that pH balance in your soil. And then rotational grazing, it's the same idea as a crop rotation where you don't use up the nutrients in the soil, you reinvigorate it using different things. You can do rotational grazing. So you would start with letting the livestock graze, and then let it grow again, and then let them graze again. And you can have different types of animals grazing in different places because it reinvigorates differently. So rotational grazing, you might have cows for a while, and then you have the deeper root systems growing, and then you increase the yield of the pasture, and then you don't have to use as many harmful uh, dependent chemicals and so on. Okay, so in 1990, part of the Farm Bill, a led piece of legislation, is the Organic Foods Production Act. Okay, so labor costs are high, but you can sell food at a premium. So they made a law so that you could sell organic food for more money, and people would understand that it took more effort to put into that, and then there would be a way to make money from it. So in organic agriculture, there's no synthetic pesticides or fertilizers. That's the big thing about organics. Doesn't mean no pesticide, no fertilizer. It just means no synthetic pesticides or fertilizers. Okay, so growing organic food has been increasing, especially in certain places where people are more affluent. We did talk about this a little bit, that it's kind of crazy to think that you have to be rich to eat foods that were grown without pesticides. And it's not so much the pesticides that you ingest yourselves. It's not like anything you buy that's not organic has a bunch of pesticides and you're getting pesticides in your body. It's more that they're not using the pesticides in the environment so it doesn't get everywhere else. There's a lot of laws to protect us from the foods that we eat and the pesticides that are on the foods that we eat. However, the allowance of that happening will get more into like runoff and into waterways and things like that. So eating organically does decrease your risk of getting diseases, perhaps like cancer, that would happen if you were exposed to too many pesticides, but it also decreases the whole world's exposures to pesticides. Okay. So, what's the benefit of the free range beef and chicken versus the CAFOs? So, if you remember the CAFOs, that's the concentrated agricultural feeding operations where there's lots and lots of animals all together. Free range, the animals have a free range, they can roam around. So, there's a lot of laws about the different kinds, and you notice this if you've ever bought eggs. There's free range eggs, cage free eggs. There's a lot of differences there. But for us, we can just go with the free range versus the CAFOs. And the benefits are that it's more ethical and humane treatment of animals. These little guys look way happier than the ones that are all stuck together. Fewer antibiotics and medications, less fossil fuel use because they don't have to supplement the feed. The animals just eat the food that's out there, and animal waste is recycled back into the land because, while they're eating, they're pooping. And there you go. You've got your nice little cycle going. Okay. So the drawbacks is it requires much more land and the costs are higher. So when I choose and I go to the grocery store and I pick out free range eggs as opposed to non-free ranged eggs, it does cost a lot more, but it makes me feel better about how I treat the environment and the food that my family is ingesting. Really, the best thing is to have chickens in your own backyard, and you take your food scraps and you throw them out, and the chickens eat it, and then you get eggs from them. My sister has chickens up in Alaska, which is crazy. These little chickens running around and they're in the snow. Chickens do run around in the snow. It's crazy. But they have a little heater there and it melts. And then mostly they're just worried about animals coming in and eating their chickens. They have to have it covered because the bald eagles come in and will pick off a chicken. Anyway, yeah, I would love to have. My backyard's just not that big, and chickens are a lot of work. So what I really want is a neighbor with chickens, and then I can make them something out of the bake them a cake and then trade them. That would be a really cool way to go. All right, so there is an article called "No Barcode," and there's discussion questions that you can do with that. So this is an article that you could read, but basically it's talking about how to be more sustainable with your food. And so this is something that it's okay to skip. And then the last thing was talking more about is free range eating the whole answer? Maybe not. It's a little more complicated than that, but this is what we need for this unit. And that's the end of this lecture. Thanks for watching.